if we want to look at them. I wouldn't have thought about that before.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. So we're just at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Co-Requisite Connect, Unlocking Success Together. My name is Marissa Maffei, and I'm a member of the customer success team here at Hawks Learning. I'm also joined by my colleague here, Amin Austin, educational courseware representative. I am thrilled to be your moderator for this insightful discussion where we'll be delving into the implementation process and successful practices surrounding co-requisite courses. As a member of the customer success team here at Hawks Learning and former educator myself, I am passionate about supporting educators like you as we navigate the implementation process and best practices surrounding co-requisite courses. The importance of this topic cannot be overstated. As initiatives to implement co-requisite courses gain momentum, educators are faced with the challenge of navigating the logistics and complexities inherent in these endeavors. Today's interactive session presents a unique opportunity to engage directly with colleagues in the field, enabling us to share insights, strategies, and tips for running successful co-requisite courses. Our goal is simple: to empower you with the knowledge, resources, and confidence to foster an environment where both you and your students can thrive. With that in mind, we are privileged to welcome two esteemed speakers who bring a wealth of expertise and experience to the table: Professor Emily Carpenter from Seminole State College and Professor Brandon Ford from Navarro College. Thank you both for joining us today and for generously sharing your insights.
Thanks for having us.
During today's webinar, we will be using a Q&A format. While we've gathered some of the most commonly asked questions surrounding co-requisite courses, we also welcome your input. So please feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat at the bottom of the Zoom room screen. My colleague Amin and I will be monitoring the chat, and we'll reserve some time at the end to address as many of your questions as possible. Please also take a minute to complete the JOT form found in the link of the chat for a chance to be entered to win a $50 gift card. So without further ado, let's dive into this discussion and explore the keys to unlocking success in co-requisite education. So thank you again, Brandon and Emily. We'll just get started and jump into the Q&A real quick. The first question being, what are the most critical aspects to address before initiating the implementation of a co-req course? So in your opinion and your experience, what are the most critical aspects to address before initiating the implementation process of a co-req course?
Well, for us, it was, what is the generalized setup you're going to go for? Are you going to go with a lab-based style where the student goes to the credit level course and then they just have some time in a lab to work with just-in-time remediation? Or are you going to go with like what Navarro set up? Are you going to go with a 3-3 lecture model where you've got 3 hours in the credit level course and then an additional 3 hours in the developmental course for additional lecture? Is it going to be course-based or non-course based? How are you going to grade it? What are you going to use for grading criteria and things like that? And we at Navarro picked a 3-3 model, particularly for college algebra, because of just the vast amount of pre-knowledge that you're going to need, or that students are going to need to be able to get through that credit course. So we spend the first few weeks teaching factoring, how to evaluate, how to solve, things like that, integral skills that they're going to need to be able to succeed in. And then that course comes before the credit course, so they can go to the credit course to get the skills that they need from there.
I'll unmute myself. Sorry, I've got spring allergies going on, so I was trying not to cough while Brandon was talking. Yes, to echo, obviously, just the overall structure, but I think primarily for us, we made the switch to 100% co-req model in 2015, 2016. So our state was doing a lot of talking about it, but it was more than anything just to get all the stakeholders on board with the philosophy. I think that's where we started. And of course, at the community college level, we have a lot of instructors that are at our institution anyways, that are coming from K-12. And so this mimics a lot what K-12 has been doing with a full inclusion model for special education for decades. And so we kind of paralleled it with that, like, oh, this is something that, you know, I mean, there's an abundant amount of data that shows that a full inclusion model is effective, and all the different reasons why we know then the co-requisite model with just the structured approach to pairing the students. We really try in our general education. We have actually 4 math pathways, and they all have a co-req with them. And we just band-aided it. We actually moved from a prerequisite remedial model to co-req and adopted Hawks all at the same time. From a data perspective, we probably should have done one and then done the other, because then when people ask, well, what was, cause effect, what was the, explanatory aspect of, this great increase, we can't put a pinpoint one. We're going to say it's a combination thereof. But when we did that, we really tried hard. We cap our co-req courses at 22 students, where our face-to-face classes can have up to 40. And so we're really driving to have that balance between those needing remediation and not needing remediation. And again, that mimics a lot of what you see in a regular classroom full inclusion model. So we had a lot of meetings working with Vice President of Student Affairs, our enrollment advising, our testing center, and just really making sure that overall that everybody was, our school counselors that, were sending students and advising students as they're graduating, just making sure everybody was on board and understood the data behind it and why we were doing what we were doing. We kind of knew practice-wise what we wanted to do, but again, we just needed everybody to, so that way everybody that was speaking to these students and explaining, and even to parents themselves. Of course, we had this pathways business going on too. So everybody's trying to send students to college algebra. And we ended up having to rename, we split our college algebra to a functions and modeling class, and then the pre-calc for engineering computer science. We ended up having to rename the traditional college algebra because we still had all these, parents are like, well, I took college algebra, so, my kids should too. It's like, well, now it's driven by actually your major. So that's, again, lots and lots of informational meetings and just making sure everybody understood the why behind the what.
Perfect. Thank you. What successes have you experienced with the implementation of co-requisite courses at your institution? Are there any particular outcomes or achievements that stand out to you?
I would say that I mean, when I went to look at our data, the year that we moved from non-co-req to co-req, we saw a 10% jump in success rates, and that's just a semester to semester success rate. And retention rate went up as well. More of what I've got is anecdotal. So we've had students that will take a co-req course because they're required to. And at first they really balk at it because they're like, 6 hours of math in a semester. I don't want to take 3 hours of math in a semester. Well, I certainly don't want to take 6. And they'll sign up for this course. And we've got students that come out of the course, and they're science majors, so they've got to have 2 math courses, the college algebra, and then follow it up with statistics. And they come to us and they say, well, can I take a co-req statistics? And we're like, well, you're not really required to. I mean, you're TSI complete after you've and TSI Texas Success Initiative exam. It's the entrance exam for the college. We said, well, you're TSI complete, so you really don't have to. Like, you're good. You can go into stats now. And they're like, well, I don't want to. I want to take the co-req. It was so helpful. I really want to do that. So we let them. And that, I think, is the most telling success. I could throw numbers out all day and I could show you graphs and charts, but the human aspect of it and the stories that we get from students, I think, is the most telling that we can get.
I'm going to go in and share my screen because I have a couple of, also have some good qualitative versus quantitative data here. Ooh, let's see if I can, sorry, I really do this sometimes, I promise. And so I just have a couple. This is a presentation I did a while back, but we got some quotes from students, but some of the pictures are funny, so I always like to share them. But one of the things we really noticed that students enjoyed was the structure. I guess I need to back up and say the structure is similar, I believe, to what Brandon was saying. We do a 3-in-3 model, and it is immediately following the general education credit bearing course. Sometimes it has structure, sometimes scheduling wise, it has to come before. Sorry, I took some cold medicine this morning, so my words are a little slow today. It's a Friday. But most of the time we like to have it right after the credit bearing course. And every once in a while, magically, we also get to have the same instructor teach it. Now that doesn't always happen. In fact, my co-rec is actually being taught right now by another instructor who is actually amazing and has a degree in engineering. So one could argue that either way. Sometimes it's nice. I like teaching my own co-rec, but sometimes it's nice for them to have, good cop, bad cop, or even have just somebody else that can come in and describe what I've just taught in a different way. This guy in particular, this is one of our more interesting ones. Non-traditional student came in. He actually just finished his degree at Oklahoma State University in mechanical engineering. Came in with good math skills, but it had been a minute because he was a non-traditional student. You can see he's a bit of a character. But he really did love the cohort aspect of having the co-requisite course directly after. Because we have the 4 math pathways and we're a smaller institution, a lot of our students are actually kind of these like organic cohorts that follow, he was in physics 1 and chem 2 and calc 1, eventually with these same groups of students that came along. And so they kind of formed this cohort because our math pathways are driven by their majors. And so, all of our education classes, those students are taking, there's only a couple of sections of them. So that's been something that maybe we didn't predict would happen, that students have formed these, like I said, these kind of organic cohorts and then go through together. And I lied again, sorry, cold medicine 15-16 as we piloted it. And then 17-18, we went full cohort, the full co-rec model. And so you can see we had a big jump. And this just has them all together. I have a whole bunch of different tables that shows them broken up by pathway. But just for a quick snapshot, this is us getting students through college level math in 1 semester. So this is gathering fall and spring data. And to be honest, even summer data as well. And so just getting them through whenever they're taking their math course. Of course, we prefer it to be their first semester, but that's not always the case. And so this is the first time students taking it, getting them through. And so we jumped from, in the 50s, and you see a little bit of an increase in 14-15, 15-16, we started piloting. 14-15, I think we had 2 sections. And 15-16, but we were just piloting it with our traditional college algebra. So we had this big jump in 17-18. Again, we also picked up, we went from using another online program to using Hawks Learning for all 4 pathways. And so that, again, we can't really say for sure it was 100% co-rec. In fact, we know it wasn't. We also know that it was the mastery-based approach and holding these students accountable, because our traditional, what we've been using traditionally was not mastery-based approach. And you see we've had a little bit of dips here and there. I actually just had to run this data. You guys know that data sometimes really lags. So I actually just had to pull this data this fall, and I was really nervous to pull that COVID data because the COVID data had really lagged, and I was like, oh dear, like I don't even know if I want to add any more bars. But guys, it didn't fall as much as we expected. And we put some things in place, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, because we are seeing some new struggles coming out of COVID and addressing those. And I know there's nationwide discussions about that. So we are having to continually modify and adjust, but we're still really happy with where we are, as far as the structure we have and the different supports we have for our students. So yeah.
And I would like to echo there. So we are kind of the opposite style setup. We are the 3-3 model. We always set our developmental ahead of the college algebra. Just and ideally, when we have our option, we set our developmental up, say, on a Monday, Wednesday, and then the credit level course meets on Tuesday, Thursday at the same time frame. So if we have a 9:30 to 11 developmental on Monday, Wednesday, then we'd have a 9:30 to 11 college algebra on Tuesday, Thursday. Um, we do two different instructors. I would love to get back to a single instructor teaching both. That's the traditional ALP model. And I would love to get there. We've met some resistance with administration on doing that. But at the moment, we are two different instructors. A word of caution. I know there's probably going to be a section here in a minute that we're going to talk about lessons learned and things like that. But some caution. It's going to depend on how you set up your instructor pairing, particularly if you go with two different instructors. I've got one instructor that I'm paired with that she knows what all I've got to cover. She is very cognizant of the amount of material I have to pre-teach. So she goes really slow. The first day of class, all she does is the syllabus. The second day of class, she teaches one topic out of 4.1, but not a whole lot. And that gives me a lot of time to really front load that data at the very beginning of the semester. I've paired with other instructors. Day one, they hit the ground and they're running. And if they're running, I'm doing a sprint. I mean, I am really trying to get caught up there, trying to front load that information. So whenever you do plan that, make sure that your instructors have good, constant communication with each other. In math, that's great. We're all on the same hallway. Our English co-recs are halfway across campus, and we haven't seen nearly the amount of success with the English as we have the math, just because of that constant communication between instructors.
Well, and I can circle back. I'm glad you said that about English, Brandon, because it's not just math. So our English, our Comp 1 is also a fully co-rec model as well. So we have no prereqs on our campus, and in fact, as a state, we're being really pushed. Even the institutions that still do have any sort of there's some interesting discussions at the state level right now about pulling funding for all remedial, and we're fighting to keep it for co-rec. So it's a whole shebang right now. We have a new chancellor, but anyways, institutions of the statewide in Oklahoma are being pushed to eliminate prereq courses. And so our English also went to a full co-rec model. I believe it was last year. And they actually pair it. It is not a differentiated course. They're credit bearing, like there's one section for those that need the remediation, and they go directly like that. It's just the same 20 students that go then to the co-rec. And so they basically are getting the 6 hours just all together. It's not that mixed. But the schedule is the same as far as either directly before or directly after. And as far as pairing, I'm glad you talked a little bit too about how you pair the co-rec instructors together. And I do think that is important. I've got an instructor that I teach with that I think knows me better than I know myself. And actually will sometimes be like, well, I bet Emily didn't talk about this, Professor Carpenter, whatever, and it's because I didn't. She just knows that I'm like, I probably didn't say that, or she teaches it. She is, sometimes she'll come in and observe my class, and then she'll decide to structure it a different way just to meet those different learning styles. So to be honest, that is even probably better. I selfishly like to teach my own because it makes me a better instructor. I can think I nailed something, and then I go into my co-rec and they're asking questions. I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe let's go back. But the beauty of the co-rec too is that they're all individual. And so I can have two statistics co-recs the same day, teach the same lesson, and the time with those students looks completely different because it's that flipped classroom approach. And so they drive the instruction, which just feels so nice because I feel like a lot of times in class, I'm driven by a schedule and a syllabus and trying to get through. And not that we're not trying to get those students through, but we can just kind of breathe and take a breath of fresh air and be like, okay, what do we need to work on today? And sometimes that looks like students working in small groups together. Sometimes that looks like them working individually and me just tutoring. Sometimes it looks like me providing a 10-minute mini lesson and re-talking through what I just talked about in class, that they say, hey, like, could you slow that down just a little bit? So again, selfishly, that's why I like it, because I think it challenges me professionally. But there are times I think for sure that that partnership probably is more even beneficial than having the same instructor. So it can work either way.
Perfect. Thank you. How have you, and I'm glad that you're talking a lot about successes like student success. It sounds like, with the implementation of the co-rec structure, that seems to be where you're seeing student engagement, student retention increasing, and student performance increasing, which is incredible. But I was also curious, how have you addressed challenges or obstacles encountered during the implementation of the co-rec course process? Are there any lessons learned or strategies you would recommend to other institutions who are considering similar initiatives?
Well, I think I said a little bit earlier, the cutting edge is always the bleeding edge. And we were definitely on the bleeding edge when we started doing this. So we did have a lot of lessons that we learned. Best thing I can say is if you're going to do this, whether you're going to be implementing it, if you're going to be teaching it, either for the credit level or the developmental, completely is blessed are the flexible, for they'll not be bent out of shape. I think it's one of the forgotten beatitudes. It's what I live by. I've pretty much got it plastered all over my wall here. But really, seriously, be flexible. Your college algebra, for example, at least in our instance, there's so much pre-knowledge, I think I've said before, but we've got a statistics and we've got a contemporary math, and them not so much. I mean, they're so there's not as much there. So do you want to do a 3-3, or do you want to maybe do a lab based on those? And then of course, when you play with that, we've discussed moving that from a 3 to just a lab based, but then you get instructor load issues, and I mean, there's all kinds of things you've got to play with there. And I was skeptical when we went 100% correct. I'll be honest. I'm a believer that there's no silver bullet for anything. And so whenever they started talking about 100% correct, I'm like, well, what about the students it doesn't work for? And the answer to that is you've got to make it work for them. Particularly whenever you're 100% correct. Now, we did kind of go with the spirit of the law in Texas, House Bill 2223. And that is when we have students that do not truly score high enough to be even in developmental education, they score at adult education and literacy level. We implemented an actual developmental co-rec. So they are in adult education and literacy, and we pair that with a developmental intermediate algebra course. So they're taking intermediate algebra, they're learning financial literacy planning, they're learning the solving, they're learning graphing, they're learning things like that they would learn in a developmental course, but they're getting AEL supports as well that go in there and teach them fractions and work with them on their multiplication tables and work with them, things that we just cannot teach. So that was one of the flexibility things that we came up with is, well, what do we do with these students that are not AEL? Are not credit level? How do we get them in? How do we get them served? So a student can truly, if they come in at the absolute lowest level possible, I'm talking numeric literacy, a student can take AEL with developmental in a pairing in one semester, and then they're correct with college algebra in the next semester. So what originally would have taken 5 semesters, we've gotten down to where they can do in 2. So be aware of that. I've talked about, just work well with your partner instructor, know your schedule, be flexible, because if they miss because they get the flu, it's going to throw you off. It really is. We had, I'll I have a tendency to talk all day if I'm allowed. So I'm going to tell one story and then I'm going to pass the hat. But last semester we had an instructor whose father unexpectedly passed away toward the end of the semester. And I walked into the developmental course because basically that course was the college algebra was being transferred to online format. And I walked in at the end of the semester and I said, okay, guys, I said, I know that I'm your developmental instructor, but I'm putting on a different hat. We're scrapping the rest of this developmental course, and I am going to teach you college algebra for the remainder of the semester. And you have to be willing to do that, to roll with the punches. So I went in, I destroyed what was left of my Canvas course, and we completely flipped a switch. Switched all of the remaining homeworks to bonuses through the Hawks learning system, so that it would boost their grade in the developmental course. Still required them to do it. Still kind of inserted those pieces in the lectures while I was teaching college algebra, but you just have to be prepared to not go in with even a strict schedule because it will change.
So initially when we started, we had, some obvious challenges, like, just trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of communication and making sure we were we had enough co-recs open, and we haven't even spoke about online co-recs, which we can do that if anybody is interested as well. When we initially started, we did not pilot this in online, and then we've extended it to online, so we can discuss that. So we've kind of had different levels. The obstacles and challenges continue to grow. Initially, we were really concerned about attendance. And so we knew that this was could potentially be an issue, that this group of students could possibly, again, we're kind of working on those academic success skills, and attendance was one of the things, hey, we need them to be here. And so we actually have an attendance policy that's pretty strict, that is just for our developmental students, our co-rec students, and it also, there's some grace in it. It's strict because we want to create like a good habit for students, and really kind of teach them this is how you do college. And then also the flip side of that is it gives us the ability to give them an AW if they just disappear off the face of the planet, because many of these students are non-traditional students, they're first gen college students, and just really think, I mean, you guys know that if they just stop coming to class, then I don't know what they think happens, but they, I don't know, withdraw or something. And so it gives us the opportunity to give them an AW. And so there's kind of some grace in that. But so that's what we did initially. And then you guys are going to laugh at me with all my slides, but I actually just did a presentation for Hawks about the first couple of weeks and what we did since COVID. I don't know if anyone else is tired of saying since COVID, but I am tired of saying that. But we have new challenges, some that we couldn't predict, and it doesn't really matter. We can talk from now until forever about why they're here and what should be happening in K-12, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because it's what we need to approach now. And so academic success skills, again, we have this group of students that we knew already were struggling with some of these skills that maybe they just were not being taught in high school, and or just not picking up. And so, from the poor attendance, now we have this inability to persist. And again, we had this before, it's just a magnification, and it feels like, and I don't think I'm alone in this. So we met actually, I think about 2 summers ago, kind of when we felt like everything was coming back, and we were like, okay, how do we address this after we had our, moment of grumpiness and pity party? And of course, now we also have this skyrocketed. We've had to adjust enrollment because we have a big increase, like about a 10% increase of students needing remediation now, and a whole group of them that aren't taking the ACT. It's just this whole, I don't know, it's the whole thing. And so a couple of things we did is we actually really slowed up. We slowed up the beginning of all 4 pathways. And so we went back and looked at our course pacing, and I think I have one here. This is for quantitative reasoning. So for example, you see that the first 3 weeks, and this mimics what we do for all 4 pathways, we just decided, and we had some instructors that were like, well, I don't know, I got to get started first day, we got to be factoring the first day. But really philosophically, again, just kind of getting all on the same page, hey, let's talk explicitly about academic success skills. And so we use the lessons that are in Hawks, and then there's like there's a little packet that goes with it, and I personally, my class breaks off into groups, and we explicitly talk about academic success skills. I teach them, even though I don't feel like I should, but I am. And we have some good conversations. To be honest, it's a good opportunity for them just to get into Hawks, and those questions are not mathy in nature, and so they can get in and explore the platform without it, taking away any sort of the math anxiety they might have initially. And then you see we have a whole bunch of review skills, and I know that we're going to talk about the integrated review that's in Hawks, but what we used to do just in our co-recs, we're actually now putting review skills into our credit bearing. We don't know if we will have to do that forever, but we felt that enough students were at the use but confused stage, even those that didn't need the remediation. And so we're just taking the opportunity in class to either create a mini lesson over it and say, hey, let's, one of those is over rounding, guys. So 5 minutes, we talk about rounding because they can't enter the answers correctly if they don't know how to round. And a lot of it is just activating prior knowledge. It's there, they were taught, but again, for whatever reason, it's just not in that, just use but confuse is where we live a lot as they come into our courses. So that's kind of some of the different things like I said, we created kind of more of a structured pacing guide. Everybody is slowing up. And I think we've been just a lot more explicit with intervention as well. And so if students, instead of waiting till midterms, or we just really have been jumping on those students, like, hey, come, let's talk, let's sit down and talk about, and of course, there's been this great influx of mental health issues now. And so I'm, also doing a bit of counseling, it seems, as they come in, because a lot of times when they come in and meet, I mean, as soon as I start seeing zeros pop up, and again, if I'm teaching my own co-rec, or if I'm paired with someone, they're meeting with those students and they have more of a relationship. You get an opportunity to have more of a personal relationship with students in the co-recs. And so we can sit down and talk about, is this a math problem? Is this a time problem? And then again, just I've always kind of spoke to this, the lack of math prereq skills. So there's some math at work projects we do, again, just working on academic success skills, but those first couple of weeks, I've started teaching problem solving and reasoning and looking critically at problems, again, as a kind of paired with persisting. So that's some of the ways, I mean, it's not perfect, but that's some of the ways that we've identified our new problems. And I think we'll live here for a while. I don't know what data, what's going to happen over the next couple of years. Hopefully we're seeing, our students who are getting now had a pretty legit Algebra 2 experience. So, I mean, hopefully we're kind of on this downhill decline, and we may go back to more of the traditional course pacing. But again, just the beauty of the structure is that we are able to meet students where they are and get them where they need to go. And going back to those original conversations, that's literally the philosophy of co-requisite education. But it's just constantly evolving, especially when you throw in a pandemic and lack of instruction. So
thank you so much. We are going to be getting to the Q&A where we're getting a lot of questions coming in. But before we do, I was hoping we can just talk real briefly, and you've already kind of touched a little bit on this, but specifically, like, how have you integrated Hawks Learning plus integrated review titles into your co-requisite courses? I know, Emily, you shared like the chapter zeros were great for those initial starts of semester conversations with students and those academic skills. But what features or functionalities of the platform have been most beneficial to your students and instructors?
So we use integrated review for all college algebra, stats, contemp. The only one we don't use it for is business math, and it's because it's not quite been developed yet. We use intermediate algebra as a pairing for that course because it teaches some really good skills there. So we use it extensively. We use the instructor created content a lot for if there are questions that we really want to focus on. For example, in the inverses section, we wanted to really get the skill out there. How do you cancel a binomial in the denominator? So we just created a bunch of questions, just cancel this binomial, denominator. I'm going to say that one of the biggest features that we use is the reporting tools built in, the assignment reviewer. So the developmental instructor will go in just about daily and pull the assignment reviewer and use that to kind of guide their lecture. So if I can go into the assignment reviewer and say 65% of the students missed question number 5, I'm going to pull question number 5 and I'm going to work it, knowing that they're going to have an algorithmically generated question. It's going to be different when they log in to do their homework. So at least they have an example of that. And then what we can do is also that tells me you're not doing your homework. You don't know to ask me questions because you haven't tried it, right? So how do we address that? So that assignment reviewer really guides my lecture and allows me to pick and choose the R sections within the integrated review that we can then assign.
So I promise Brandon and I didn't practice this beforehand. But yeah, that was one of the things, the assignment reviewer. And that's something actually, because I attended some training, I believe it was last year, and they were highlighting assignment review. And I was like, I don't know why I'm not using this. It is funny because I'll pull it up and I'd be like, well, it looks like 4 of you certified on this. So, they're like, oh, so that is a little bit good accountability because you can't see who it is, but you can see how many, on that little chart. But I do use assignment reviewer as well, so that's a great tool. Also creating practice tests, and so that's something I've seen students continuously rely on, and they are able to build those practice tests in the co-rec. So if we're preparing for an exam or a quiz, then they have that good 2 hour at a time. So a lot of times they will come in and create a practice test, ask some questions, and then go into their assessment. And that's just such a good structured way to study for a math test. And I explicitly teach them how to use that tool. In fact, I even give extra credit for creating a practice test because I do think particularly math exams are hard to study for, and it's just such a great way to focus their time efficiently and effectively. And I do, circling back to the integrated reviews, I do allow students, I do kind of a diagnostic test way of working with those integrated reviews at the beginning of the semester. So I allow students to test out of them as well. So that is the tool that I use. I don't use it throughout the entire semester, but I just use it the first couple of weeks. And so, yeah, and all the reports are great as well. So time per lesson is another one we utilize as well to have conversations about, well, you've only spent 4 minutes at 2 a.m. on this lesson. Maybe you should be more patient with yourself and get some sleep before you panic, or you've spent 4 hours. Let's get you in and do let's do some structured support for you.
I love that the use of the reporting features for, accountability and, really helping kind of drive a plan of action that would be appropriate for the individual student. So that's awesome. I'm going to get to some of the questions that are coming in because we got a couple. Can you give us, with no practical experience, or those of us with no practical experience delivering a co-requisite model, some idea of a realistic timeline for implementation away from the traditional prereq model?
We made the change within about a year. So once you make the decision that you're wanting to do co-rec, you're going to have to get your advising team on board, because that's going to be a real challenge. We had multiple meetings with advising because it's completely new for them. I mean, the idea that if you scored this, then you need this, and if they didn't, then they take this course, and it adds a level of complexity. However, after you start with that advising piece, then you've got to go in and you've got to start talking to your registrar's office piece. The way we've got ours set up is if you're dropped from one of the two courses, you've got to be dropped from both, and it's an automatic deal. If college algebra drops you for non-attendance, you're not in my developmental class anymore. And so that is something that is something that's going to take some time too, is working with your programming team and determining the abilities of your student information system platform that you're using. But we went 25% in about a year of planning.
It took us 3 years. So 15, 16 is when we piloted it with a couple of, in fact, I think it was 3 sections of college algebra. Again, we were kind of looking at changing pathways at that point too. Then the next year, all of our college algebra went to a co-rec model. But again, we still had students that were coming out of basic algebra. So there was students that had passed basic algebra. So it was still kind of more of a controlled group going in, if that makes sense. And then after we kind of made sure, basically we were just making sure that the structure was what we wanted it to be and working out the, who was teaching what and when, and making sure we had enough instructors. And of course the credentialing can be a little bit different too. So depending on your state. So ours took about 3 years. We just kind of baby stepped it. But then when we did decide to do 100% co-rec, we just band-aided it and did all of it. So, and I will say we had about a year and a half in, we had a group of students and some advisors that really wanted a basic algebra prereq to come back. We brought it back and I was the new division chair and I just collected data on it. They did the same thing in English, to be honest. Students were coming in, typically non-traditional students, saying, hey, I really want this remedial class. And so we just kept data on them and we just kind of determined, how they did going forward. And all the students that did well, we determined the instructor, and then coming back, actually the students, because we're small and they said they probably could have gone into the credit bearing and been just fine. And so, and then some of those students we were losing anyways, they weren't finishing or they were changing majors and ended up taking another pathway. So we did go back for just a minute and it wasn't necessary.
Thank you. Another question we got in was, how are students placed into a co-rec versus standalone course? Is there a placement test, direct self-placement, or other?
We use the TSI exam, Texas Success Initiative exam to support our placement. We get diagnostic models, they get a test, and then they get an overall score of 1 through 5. 1 and 2 get placed in AEL, which that we then pair with that developmental course as kind of a co-rec. And then we, if they're 5 or 6, the 1 or 2, 3 or 4, and 5, 6, we put into the co-requisite courses. Now, they can self-place if they wish. Usually those are the students that have had success and they want to self-place in. You go into an advisor and an advisor says, okay, well, there's going to be 6 hours of math. And that typically scares a student away from self-placing the first time. But we have had students second time around enroll of their own, volition into the developmental or into the co-rec developmental piece.
I know this shocks you, but I have a chart for this. Let's see if it'll pull over. There we go. So because we have the different pathways, so ACT, if they take it, comes first. And then we use that AccuPlacer, and we actually, speaking of changes, we decided that we had a departmental test we were using, and it was heavily algebraic, so it was not testing quantitative reasoning and statistics well, or college readiness for those. So we actually switched to the quantitative reasoning, algebra, and statistics AccuPlacer for you guys that use AccuPlacer. And then we also have a multiple measures rubric. And so we have really 3 different ways that we can place students in the multiple measures rubric. They're going to share our contact information. I'd be happy to share that with anybody that cares. But it basically looks at a high school GPA. They have to have 2 letters of recommendation from an instructor, and it takes the ACT and the OccuPlacer into account. So there's several different ways to place, but I would say most of our students are placing into the Co-Req either off of the ACT or OccuPlacer.
Perfect, thank you. This question's a little bit more, I'd like more information on the grading aspect versus the placement. In terms of how the 2 classes work, are grades in the college algebra and in the co-requisite class the same, or are they independent of each other? So basically, how does the grading system work between credit level and co-requisite courses?
We have the requirement that the developmental portion of the co-req be non-course based. So we've named them the NCBM courses, non-course based mathematics. And because of that, because we have to somehow make them non-course, what we do is we still give them the Hawks certification assignments. But then, of course, what can they do? I mean, we don't do tests because that would make it a course, right? So we don't test them throughout the course. But what we do, since our goal is to get them through their credit-bearing class, we take some of the credit-bearing assignments, tests, we bring those grades in as kind of a piece of that score, so that we can address, is our teaching working? And are they doing it? Personally, I break it up into the categories of Hawks at a quarter, the credit exams as a quarter, and then I bring in participation. So I require them, whenever they're about to take an exam in their credit bearing course, they have to take the practice test. And that practice test is a grade in my course. You know, if they're doing a signature assignment, they have to turn their rough draft into me so I can look at it and I can determine, is it good or is it not? And that's a grade. And then I take a percentage of the final exam and I put that in as part of their grade. So it is, we do not assess, we do not give tests ourselves, which kind of alleviates the fear when the student walks in, because I mean, we're all educators here. We hear, I've got test anxiety, I can't do tests, I'm too nervous, I'm too scared. Well, half of our battle is just trying to get them confident. If we can't get them confident, we've lost them anyway. So I tell them first day of the class, hey, we're not going to have tests. Who's happy about that? You know, and then of course everybody, cheers. And, I feel like I've won a small victory there just by trying to get them a little bit out of their shell. But that's how we've got it set. I mean, there's any number of ways, of course, to do it, but to make ours non-course based, that's what we do.
We are similar. It's a pass fail, and it is tied directly to the credit bearing course. We actually had to write that in. Speaking of things you have to go in and adjust, something to think about if you're writing procedure or policy for that. Make sure they're paired together, because you don't want someone passing the credit, or passing one and not passing the other. That doesn't happen very often, but we've had that scenario, so we had to go backtrack a little bit. So it's pass fail. It's tied directly to the credit bearing. It's based off of 70%. There's some academic freedom in how the instructors set those up. Traditionally, I set mine up with a third attendance, a third integrated review skills, just a completion rate on that, and then their credit bearing, their statistics, their whatever, pre-calc, whatever they're doing in their credit bearing. Now that we've done integrated review, actually in the credit bearing courses, it's 50-50 for mine. I just keep it real simple. It's 50% attendance, 50% completion. So they're basically getting, if they're finishing their Hawks assignments and doing their coursework, then they're getting credit for both of those. But I mean, again, usually we just pair it together and make sure. So if someone else is teaching your co-req, then you've really got to make sure you're constantly communicating, that, hey, someone's, they're doing great, they're attending, and they're maybe finishing assignments, but they failed every single quiz and they're credit bearing, something is not, they're paying someone to do their assignments or something, something, there's a miscommunication there. But that has seemed to work well for us and is simplistic in nature.
Perfect. I had a question come in asking about best practices for transferring your pair curriculum, like Hawk Shell, Canvas Shell, LMS Shell, I suppose. Um, just best practices for transferring the pair curriculum.
Just some clarification. Transferring, you mean?
I suppose, and feel free to clarify for this question. I'm assuming this means the best practices from going from like the traditional towards the co-rec curriculum, and like how it would be any best practices you have to offer in terms of its structure for Hawk Shell or LMS or Shell
So
for other
we
teachers.
do Hawks learning, and then we just transfer those grades over into the LMS. We have Canvas. If you would like some further reading, we learned how we were going to kind of set ours up through the ALP model. And you can Google it out there. I learned about it actually at a Hawks conference years ago. The speaker talked to us with some good best practices and things like that. But there's some great information there in the ALP model. But as for best practices, I mean, just we I roll my courses every semester, and then I just tweak them as needed. What did I notice worked well last semester, and how could I change that? But for the most part, I use the course copy features both in Canvas and Hawks. I
I
think I
think,
answered the question, maybe.
hang on, George Jessup was the one who asked that question, so I'm
Okay.
gonna allow him to talk. So George, you should be able to talk or unmute yourself now if you want to clarify.
Just for a second, I've
Yeah.
been doing this for many, many years, and the biggest problem I've had is when I develop a program and I move on to another program is getting other people who have not worked with a partner, English math, for instance, to accept, first of all, to accept that I have a developed program that's been recognized, and second of all, to transfer it directly to them. In Hawks, we have the default curriculum and we have our named curriculums, but we don't have the shell that goes with that. In other words, all the modules of lessons that you've developed that are in Canvas, etc. And I was hoping somebody could address that. Thank
I
you.
got you. Yes, I got you. So what we do is, when we do our course setup, we actually have it built to where, at the beginning of the semester, I share my Canvas course with the credit instructor, and the credit instructor shares their Canvas course with me. So it shows up as a course that is in my Canvas that I can look at anytime. I can pull anytime. I can go look at their schedule, see their announcements, things like that. We are blessed that all of our math faculty are on the same hallway. So I'll be sitting here working, and I'll yell down the hallway, Professor Parton, what you teaching today? And what you notice they're struggling with, well, how can I help you? And we have an amazing relationship to be able to do that. I think to get people involved, you've just got to show them the data. The data that was shared with us, let me see if I can share my screen. This is the data that was shared with us, and it really got a lot of our faculty on board. Got to find out which one it is. Let's share that one. And then I can. Well, I thought I had it. One second. Enjoy the beautiful image of the beach in the British Virgin Islands while I find this. But we were shown this information, if you can't see it. So this is pre and post co-requisite. So we were displayed, if it's a traditional course, Georgia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Indiana, you've got a maximum of 30% that would actually make it through. Whereas after the co-rec was implemented, jumping into the 60s and 70%. And Texas's numbers look like this too. Prior to co-requisite. So, the numbers will speak to itself. You're going to have people that let me be quite honest, was a lot like me. I was skeptical. I did not believe that there was going to be one that, and I still don't believe that there is one silver bullet that's going to fix everything. Um, but I mean, the numbers do support it. I mean, and we are logical people. I like to think that math are logical folks, and I think the numbers should kind of help. But setting it up to where you've just got a good working relationship with your partner teacher is good. And I think you start that out by showing them the numbers, and then once they start seeing that it's beneficial, then you start talking about, what do you need? I need as much information as I can because my end goal is to support you. And vice versa. When I teach the credit level course, I contact the developmental and I'm like, hey, what can I do to support you? Because you're helping me. I want to help you as well. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and George, just to piggyback off of what he said, because we also integrate projects, and that was really important as a division chair that we have these pathways. We're talking about how math is relevant to their different degree programs. And so we need some opportunities really outside even just the Hawks assignments. And we use some of the Hawks projects and some of the instructors. So they have there's some academic freedom in that, but the vice chair and I sat and built, we use D2L Brightspace, but similar to Canvas. So in our sandboxes, we have built, and we started talking about online, to be honest, because we're doing some Quality Matters certification as well. And so of course there's some best practices that go along with that. But we built those courses and then met, and to be honest, it took a little bit of support from our admin, and we don't want to take away academic freedom. But I mean, when you start talking about course structure and some just kind of non-negotiable items, I think it took our administration getting on board philosophically with what we were doing and why we were doing it, and then saying, hey, this is the structure you need to follow. If you decide to do a different project, for instance, for linear function modeling, cool, you do that, but you still need to do some sort of projects within your class. And you have to use Hawks Learning, and you have to follow, again, we kind of use this suggested pacing. And then as a STEM division chair, then it's my job to kind of circle back. So while we do appreciate academic freedom as an institution, if we've decided as a group that these are best practices and this is what the structure looks like for overall student success, then I think we have had to and I know what you're saying, there was some of our instructors that were a little bit old school, that we had one that didn't want to use like any of the online. She wanted a book for her students. And again, she didn't make it after COVID because everybody had to go online and she didn't like it, and so it was, there's been some growing pains with that, but I do think there has to be some, if you've identified as an institution, these are the practices that we know, and this is the data behind it, and this is the core structure, then I do think there needs to be some consistency within that.
Perfect. Thank you. So we are just about up on time. So I'm going to just ask this one last, hopefully quick question for everyone. And, we will provide both Emily and Brandon's contact information at the conclusion. So if you want to get more information or, kind of bounce ideas off of them, we'll be sure to include that as well. So do you have separate non-co-rec and co-rec sections, or do all students attend the base course and then part of the students go to the extra topics? So this is a little bit more of like the structure of the co-recs and credit level, it sounds like.
Yes, we commingle. We live off the philosophy that a rising tide raises all ships, right? So we put the co-requisite students in with credit students. We usually do a 10-20 split so that you might have 10 credit students to 20 developmental students. And then those developmental students will go from there into the additional support. And anecdotally, we actually have several of the credit students, because it gets around that they're in another class. We try to keep it as private as possible if the students want it private, but it gets around. And so we get the credit students like, wait a minute, you get another class that helps with this topic. I want to go to it. How do I get this, right? And so we've had some students that will just stick their head in on the co-requisite course. And they're like, I know that we didn't sign up for this, but could I stick my head in on this one? Sure, why not? The more the merrier. Right. So yeah, they are two different commingled credit and then a separate course for the developmental students.
Our math is differentiated. And again, we like that. I like that it's driven, and I think it's all the reasons Brandon just said. Our English is not, and they feel very strongly. And I hear, again, just meeting philosophically and making sure that we're meeting students where they are. They feel pretty strongly that they need to have the Comp 1 and then the co-rec. They are the same group of students, and so they have remedial sections of the credit bearing that pair, and then that'll be section 1, and then section 2 will not have a co-rec with it. So that's, but I will say also, you can't be in our co-recs or not. And that may have been actually the question. If you take section 1 of the credit bearing, then, and you need a remedial, you need to take section 1 of the co-rec. And so all those students do move together, although it won't be the whole group of 40 students that are in the statistics class. I know there are some institutions for, that you can take an online class and take a face-to-face. I mean, even within the co-recs, you can take any section of statistics and then go into any of the co-recs for statistics. We didn't like that because we wanted to make sure we kept that cohort, and we didn't want those groups of students, to be differentiated. But I mean, I think that works for some institutions.
We do the same thing here in the Corsicana campus. They stay together. Now, I will say, we have another campus that's a much smaller developmental campus. And they have to do it to where one developmental class feeds into multiple credit courses. I'm telling you, it does not work as well. I can tell you now, it frustrates both instructors. We have to do it because otherwise you've got a class with 3 students in it, and we can't have that either. But ideally, you've got one instructor paired with one instructor and not feeding into multiple classes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it looks like we are up on time. Again, thank you so much, Brandon and Emily, for sharing your insights and experiences today. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's session. Do not forget to complete the form in the chat for a chance to win a $50 gift card. I've also included some links if you'd like to learn more about the Hawks Learning co-requisite materials, or if you'd like to connect directly with Amin to learn more. You can certainly schedule time with him as well and put something on his calendar directly that works for you. Additionally, if you would like to reach out to Brandon or Emily for further information, I've included their contact information in the chat as well. So feel free to reach out. They are a wealth of a resource. And again, thank you so much today, Brandon and Emily. This was really, really helpful. And thank you all for joining today. I hope you have a wonderful Friday and weekend ahead. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.